Hello YouTube siblings, it's Farmer Dar here. I'm down in the basement with the seed starting stuff again, getting ready to start some more seeds. And I'm also going to go ahead and share with you another episode in the Witnessing the Whiteness series. So these videos here, they kind of follow a format where, you know, here I am, a white skin privileged person, and I'm wanting and trying to do and be anti-racist, but you know, I'm seeing and I'm involved in and I'm participating in whiteness, and I'm sharing some of that out with you. Now, I am not an expert on racism, not at all. So in fact, if you have some ideas or suggestions, and maybe, you know, you can even expand our knowledge as a part of the community, please feel free to contribute your ideas in the comments. The last episode, where we witnessed some whiteness, we had some white evangelicals team up with some white supremacists to protest Drag Queen Story Hour over in the Central West End. While those Christian evangelicals were able to collaborate with the white supremacists, and you really couldn't always tell who was who, they did a fine job preying on people just trying to have a story read to them by drag queens. Yet at the end of their protest, they couldn't even pray together in a circle. So that was all of that. Well, that video turned out to be one of the most popular videos so far. It had 8 likes, 11 dislikes, and about 35 comments, 34 of which had to be deleted because they were not appropriate. But thank you for participating. Now, I do read each comment and I reflect on what is written. Sometimes it's how fat I am. Sometimes it's that I'm a lesbian, but they don't say it that nicely. But you know what? One commenter, in between their insults, they did bring up a phrase that I thought I better research and chose to investigate. So I pulled this little morsel out. The phrase the commenter used was virtue signaling. Well, immediately I was curious about what that meant, because that's not actually a term that I hear a lot in my social circles. As it turns out, the phrase virtue signaling was created by a James Bartholomew. Barty. So James Bartholomew, a British journalist, a conservative journalist who has written for the UK Spectator, apparently back in 2017 had some stroke of literary white supremacy. I mean, had a stroke of, well, he wrote some words. And in his hit classic, not really, The Awful Rise of Virtue Signaling. Wait a minute. So a quick read of his article reveals that Barty is very bothered by people who speak negatively about things that negatively impact humans. Now, a generous read of his Brexit-loving Boris Johnson edited The Spectator conservative right-wing drivel is that virtue signaling is becoming popular by hating something else. And you signal how much you hate something to become popular and have friends who like you for having disliked something else. Okay, wait a minute. Isn't the title of his article The Awful Rise of Virtue Signaling? Is he trying to make friends or something? Also, in his explanation, he says virtue signaling is a way of getting credibility with a group without actually having to do any work. Wait a minute, Barty. I do believe that the social justice circles have beaten you to naming this. What you're describing, professing your dislike for something unjust, but not following through with action, well, that's performative allyship. That's already been named. Well, okay, commenter accusing me of virtue signaling. You got me. You got me if you mean. You got me if you mean signaling virtues that you believe in, such as being socially just, anti-racist, but then failing to come through when it's clutch. You got me if you mean some version of performative allyship. I've actually got the t-shirt. That's why they make t-shirts for allies, so we can perform as allies. If you mean that, you're absolutely right. There are times through a lack of competency, ignorance, that has been a thing, cowardice. There have been times because of cowardice, white privilege, just relaxing in privilege. There are times that I have failed to live up to my convictions as an anti-racist. So what do I do when I'm an anti-racist who professes these values and I fail? Sometimes I get embarrassed for me and just feel real sad for the people who had to deal with me. Wallowing in white guilt, that's not going to get any of us free. So I try not to spend too long there. But really, this was about virtue signaling. So let's break this down a little bit. What is so wrong about signaling that something is virtuous, especially if it's something pro-social that creates love and care between people? I mean, don't groups signal what they believe to be virtuous all the time? I mean, aren't there like copies of the 10 Commandments being put in front of courthouses somewhere because people are signaling their virtues? And what about the people who hold these religious views about love, but then turn around and hate LGBTQ people? Are they virtue signaling? No, that's just bigotry. We don't give a fancy word for that. So values and ethics, that show we care, that maybe help reduce harm, these are good, even if we fail to live up to them sometimes. But it's right about now that I better own up to some white privilege about this, because there's a lot of white privilege involved with not learning about racism until you make it to maybe your 30s. I mean, I knew some things were wrong, and I knew that treating people badly was not nice. But this whole idea of a society structured to advantage white people and disadvantage people of color, and to be explicitly anti-black, well, this was a little bit new to me, even though I was raised in a racist society. I grew up in a trailer park, listening to CCR, listening to Leonard Skinner. My elementary school, they taught us songs about picking cotton. We didn't know why we were singing songs about picking cotton, but we were singing songs in elementary school about picking cotton. Hint, songs about picking cotton, look into every single one of them. All of their histories are explicitly racist. I was brought up with that. Now in my family, many of us, we think it's a fine idea to let kids have as much information as possible and make their own minds up about many things, like clothing choices. Sometimes food, if we have enough food to make choices. Which books you like to read, what TV shows you like to watch. Letting kids make up their own minds is kind of a nice thing about my family, until it comes to racism. You see, my ancestors, they were very aware of Jim Crow segregation. They knew of lynchings, which is murder, by the way. Yet, there was very much in my ancestors, in my family, the idea of, well, Let the young people see what's going on and they'll make up their own minds. Now, we don't do that with a lot of different values, explicitly ones that cause harm to people. Yet, we did that with racism. What is that about? What does it mean that my ancestors observed Jim Crow segregation, knew of lynchings, witnessed white terrorism of the KKK? What does it mean that my ancestors, my family, saw that kind of stuff and just let the children figure it out for themselves? Well, what it really means is they were invested in a system that kept them on top and other people outside or even dead. That means that they were very invested in a system of white supremacy. The system that separated water fountains, that separated schools, that separated housing, that separates wealth. By my family allowing that to go unquestioned from generation to generation, they were complicit and allowed me to learn white supremacy. And now today, here we are, several generations later, and we are surrounded by racist policies. I just saw an article that another group of white nationalists has just marched on DC in masks. What in the world is going on? Is this the 1920s KKK coming back? Y'all, we need family members, we need community members, we need teachers who are willing to teach anti-racist principles, who are willing to teach other youth how to see these things and understand them as clearly wrong as murder itself. Anti-racism and anti-oppression just need to be explicitly taught as family values so we can break this intergenerational system of racism that continues to structure our communities. So what James Bartholomew did by creating this term virtue signaling, well, it's just one of the things that oppressive groups do so well. This here term has been created to silence people doing justice work, silence people doing anti-oppression work. Virtue signaling, it gaslights the targeted person, and then it creates a level of self-doubt in the agent group where there should already be some healthy self-doubt about actions. It creates a type of doubt that is unhelpful. So what Barty did is, in his making of the term virtue signaling, he created an anti-oppression silencer. It's much like the one produced by the right, politically correct. And I'll provide a link for you to Bell Hooks. Bell Hooks talks about this idea of politically correct being generated by the right as well, to create a situation where people are shamed for coming correct, and then because they think, oh well, I don't have to come correct, they feel like they're at liberty to say whatever they will in any way, be it racist, be it homophobic, just as long as they have the privilege to speak their mind, they're quite happy, with no positive regard for another person. So obviously civility is lost. I'll link that video for you. All right, siblings of the YouTubes, if you have some comments or some information or some experience to share with the terms politically correct or virtue signaling, please share your ideas in the comments. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Warming up my block those comments fingers. Play nice, y'all. Also, what are your experiences teaching your family members about racism? I imagine those experiences are very different for different families. How does your family discuss white supremacy? Does your family benefit from white privilege? What are the things you do on a day-to-day basis to make sure that the next generation hears and understands an anti-racist perspective. For example, when you're teaching your white teen how to drive, what lessons on white privilege can you share with your white teen to help them be better at disrupting racism in their life? Well, it's been wonderful sharing ideas with you again, and feel free to leave your ideas in the comments. Maybe we can have a real rich discussion where we learn mutually from each other. See you later. Now back to seed planting. Those nasty comments are gonna get deleted. Wait a minute. Let me just get this right. But thank you for participating.